Good pork chop, dude. Mm-hmm. Nice and sweet. Love your spices. Mm-hmm. Hey, we can cook pork.
Yeah, man. Welcome to the Food 52 video studio. My name is Josh. I'm the test kitchen director here. Today we're cooking with Isaac Toups, one of the best chefs in New Orleans. I'm hyped up about that. Working with pork chops. The Food 52 community has written in a bunch of questions on the hotline about pork chops. How can they be as juicy as possible, as delicious as possible? Which different type of pork chop should I buy? Today we're going to answer all those questions. We have a few different types of pork chops here. When you're shopping for pork chops, what do you look for generally?
Well, I'll always look for good marbling, good intramuscular fat, and you've actually got some great examples of it. So right here, you have beautiful marbling on the inside.
Right.
It's good to start with a good pork chop. If you start with an A pork chop and mess it up a little bit, you might still get a B. But if you start with a B, the best thing you'll ever do is only get a B.
Right.
So start with good quality pork chops. Find yourself a good butcher putting out good meat. Also, what I look for is see how the meat is red. Now, back in the day, they were breeding pork chops to be very pale. They wanted to be the new white meat. Well, they bred all the fat and all the deliciousness out of it. But nowadays, we're getting back to these heritage breeds, which we have, luckily. Good job. And you have the pork, which is red. Real pork is red. Get the red.
So that darker color is going to indicate to you more flavor.
Absolutely.
Right. When it comes to like bone in or bone out, generally, do you have a preference with that?
I always prefer bone in. The best flavor of the meat is always going to be around the bone. And what I hate to see, which I'm really glad you didn't, is when people French this part.
Okay.
People French the part of the bone out, and that's the better part of the pork chops.
Sort of gnawing in on that.
So no, that's the best part. In my restaurants, you're actually encouraged to pick up that bone and chew on it.
Yeah.
And it's so you're taking all this extra work, so you got extra labor, and then you took away the best part, and people throw it away. I'm like, that's just wrong.
Yeah.
Stop Frenching stuff, people. Jesus.
Says one of the French trained chefs. Right?
Exactly, right? Yeah. I know how to break the rules.
Yeah, all right. So for home cooks, the reason why a bone-in pork chop we think is preferable to boneless, you're gonna have more moisture right up next to the bone. It cooks a little bit slower, and it's gonna be juicier that way.
It's kind of the barrier for heat, so it allows you to have the extra juices in it. So the bones are always a plus.
Right. Almost like a little fail-safe from overcooking it too. Where like,
a little bit, yeah.
If you have a boneless pork chop, it can go from juicy to overdone really quickly.
Like that.
Yeah. So 3 different types of pork chops I brought in today. This is a rib chop, a loin chop, and then another loin chop but cut a little bit thinner. Right. Do you want to talk about the difference between a rib chop and a loin chop?
Yeah, they just come from different parts of the animal. So this is you can almost call this a T-bone, since it's almost got the New York strip of pork and the tenderloin. Yeah. And this is going to be really juicy, and this will be a little tougher, but I wouldn't say tough. Just have a little more twosome to it.
It's almost like a porterhouse steak of the pork chops, right? Where this is like the filet mignon of pork. And this
exactly, is the New York strip. I would have no problem with you calling it that. This is the porterhouse of pork. You sound like real fancy. You charge extra money for that.
Yeah, right. You just doubled your.
Yeah, and you know, and this will have the bone in the middle, and this will have the bone on the side. But I love all of these cuts. I just prepare them just a hair differently. Okay. You know? These are more for, oh man, I've got 10 minutes to cook for the kids. These are the backyard barbecue that I have plenty of time to do. I'm drinking a beer, I'm in with shorts, and got plenty of time and want to impress people.
Right. So what I was taught is that the loin chop is going to be a little more tender, but the rib chop can potentially have a touch more flavor, just because that part of the muscle is used a little bit more. Like it could have a touch more toughness, but also a touch more flavor into it.
It's the exact same thing with dark and white meat on a chicken. Yeah. So the dark meat works harder, it's got more flavor, a little tougher. The white meat might be a little more delicate, but it's not going to have as much flavor. Right. Which is why I like dark meat.
Now, let's say I'm a home cook. I have my meat in my refrigerator. I take it straight out of the fridge and it's ice cold, and I go to cook with it. Is that like a faux pas? Should it come to room temperature, or does it not really matter?
It can come to room temperature, but honestly, if you have a really thin pork chop, straight from the fridge is okay. But if you're cooking with a big thick one, I would definitely pull it out 15, 20 minutes before and just let it get room temperature, so it's not going from ice cold to the pan and you have a lot of heat differentials. And if you had to freeze your pork chops, you got a big deal on them, then pull them out, let them defrost in the fridge overnight. Try not to run them underwater, because then you're just sitting out at room temperature for a long time. You're breaking all the rules.
Yeah. Now, unfortunately, we can't set up a grill inside this Manhattan video studio. I tried to get them to grill in my mom's backyard, but they told me no.
Oh, man.
Hi, Mom.
Go see Mom. Hi, Mom.
You want to talk about different cooking methods for different cuts of pork?
Yeah, absolutely. And there's no reason you can't cook any of these on a stovetop or in the oven, because a lot of people don't have a grill, and that's completely okay. So, I mean, for thinner pork chops, you can do a wide variety of things. My children just like it when I do a simple marinade in soy sauce and vinegar, and then just cook them in a little butter and serve them right there. They love it like that.
Yeah.
Honestly, sometimes even just like a 1 minute marinade. Just toss them on. It's not going to penetrate a lot of flavor in an hour, but an hour is better than 1 minute.
Right.
But even just a really good thick coating of sauce on the outside would be perfect. These guys, I like to brine them overnight.
All right.
And the trick with that is the brine does so many things. So a brine is at the simplest, a brine is just salt and water. But that salt's going to penetrate the meats. It's going to act like the security agent, and it's going to let everything through and into the meat. So anything you have with that salt, I like to use brown sugar, black peppercorns, bay leaves. Also, it's going to act like a safety barrier. In case you overcook it a little bit, that saltiness and that juiciness are still going to be there.
So with brines, in addition to the flavor that you're imparting, there's also a moisture level that you're giving to the pork.
Absolutely. So you're actually pumping a bit with the salt, a little bit of extra moisture into it, which is going to make it even more juicier.
Yes.
So the brine, the juicing, don't overcooking it. I have 3 simple rules for pork chops.
All right.
If you're going to brine them, it's not necessary for a thin pork chop.
Right.
Season it well, and don't overcook it. You follow those simple 3 things, and your pork chops are going to be amazing. You'll be impressing people.
If you have bought your pork from a butcher who you know and respect, even just brine pork cooked with a little bit of salt, and that's it.
It's pretty much all you need. Yeah.
It's like steak.
Everything else is lagniappe.
So, talking about brine, we're using the brine from your book. The ratio, for those of you at home, for every 1 gallon of water, we're talking about 1 cup of salt and 1 cup of brown sugar, some black peppercorns, some bay leaves. It's that simple.
And the great thing about this brine is, congratulations, now you know how to brine anything.
Yeah.
When I whole roast chickens, I brine them. When I fry my turkey, I brine it. This works great for almost any meats you're going to roast. It's going to add flavor and it's going to add moisture to it. With chickens, you can switch it up and add lemon juice instead of brown sugar and white sugar. For ducks, I like to use orange juice. For turkeys, go with the flavors. I actually add some cranberry juice to it to kind of lock on those flavors. It's a universal brine.
Yeah.
And all you have to remember is the salt to water ratio. Everything else is willy-nilly.
There's one trick with this brine. You're going to simmer it for about 20 minutes. If you started with 1 gallon of water, it's going to reduce down, and you add ice back in at the end to cool it down. By the end, you should have about 1.5 gallons total volume.
That's super important, that the brine is exactly 1.5 gallons at the end to the 1 cup of salt. You can triple, you can double this, you can fill a bathtub with this and do a whole pig. I've done that. And make sure that when you add your meats, your brine is cold. Preferably cold with all the ice melted, because if all the ice isn't melted, then your brine isn't the right dilution.
Interesting. So this is actually a half batch because we didn't need to make that much brine because we're only doing a couple pork chops.
Right, and that's something to bring up. Depending on how much you need, you may not need the whole recipe I'm calling for.
Right.
My recipe calls for 2 20-ounce pork chops. They're the size of your head. If you're cooking for yourself, you can quarter this, half this, whatever you want. I will say though, it's better to have a little more than a little less. If your brine isn't covering your pork chops or covering your meats, you're not gonna have a good time. Now, you're gonna let this simmer for just about 20 minutes to really get all this, the bay leaf and the peppercorn. If you were just doing salt and sugar, you wouldn't need to simmer it at all. You just make sure the salt and the sugar are dissolved.
Right.
And again, you can add any flavor to this you want for any type of brine. Apple juice works well with pork. So does cranberry juice.
Do you ever use like hard herbs like rosemary, thyme?
Absolutely. Depending on what season it is and what I'm cooking.
Right.
Rose herbs, fruits. When I make my pig brine for my whole pigs, I put jalapenos and apples.
Nice.
The sky's the limit. Just got to remember the salt to water ratio. I'm serious. You can go. It's hard to do this wrong.
Right.
I wouldn't add anything too bitter. How's that?
Sounds good.
Yeah.
So, fast forward in time.
Ta-da!
So, our pork chops have been brined overnight. Now, take them out. Do you pat them dry? What's the next step?
Just a little bit, nothing too fancy, because any excess moisture you have on the outside is going to interfere with your wonderful searing or grilling.
Yeah. So we talked about brining with a thick cut pork chop. Now we're going to talk about marinades with a thin cut pork chop. A lot of times thin cut pork chops, I think people want to do it quickly, sort of easy weeknight dinner kind of style.
Absolutely, I do these all the time, and my children absolutely love these. I like it the really thin ones with the bone in. We cook 5 or 6 of them. I'll eat 3, they'll eat each one. But there's no reason why you can't have the thin cut pork chop. I think they're wonderful. Yeah. You can even bread and deep fry these, which you can't do with the big one because the breading would burn.
All right. This marinade that I'm about to show, the recipe is going to be on the Food 52 website. It's very simple and fairly neutral. I didn't want to go too hard in any one direction. And that way, as a home cook, you could sort of take this marinade and tweak it as you want. If you want to get a little stronger flavor, you can add some soy sauce, or you could add fresh herbs, whatever you want. First things first, I'm going to salt the pork chop.
See, now you're breaking a marinating rule.
Oh yeah?
Now the old school rule was you never salt a marinade, which I completely don't believe in and break this rule all the time.
Oh, good.
So I'm glad you're breaking this.
Yeah. See, my intuition. I tested this yesterday, and I added salt to the marinade, and I tasted it, and I thought, like, I don't know, instinctually as a chef, I wanted to salt the pork first.
Absolutely.
And then make the marinade with no salt in it and let it sit in that, and that was just the way I wanted to go forward.
Yeah, or even the other side of it, because I like to add soy sauce to it, that has a lot of salt into it.
Yeah.
So again, even though we only marinate it for a little while, that salt's gonna penetrate the flavors.
Yeah, exactly.
So good rule breaking.
All right, thank you.
I like to break a lot of rules. I do a lot of experimentation.
Yeah.
He says, well, don't do this. Well, I'm gonna try that and see if it works. And sometimes those rules stand up.
Right.
Now, I love your addition of acid, and I love your spices. Sugar, I see some garlic over there.
Yeah, so we're gonna go with lime juice, dark brown sugar. For spices, we're gonna use cumin, smoked paprika, and a little chili powder, and then a microplane garlic in at the end.
Gotcha. How about we crush the garlic?
Okay.
Can we crush the garlic?
You wanna, well, let's talk about that.
Can I? Can I do the garlic?
Yeah, crush the garlic. Do you want to crush it because you have a cool trick, or is there like a culinary reason
Well,
to do it also?
there's a super delicate way to do it that's super important, especially with garlic, because you got to treat garlic pretty nicely. You don't want to bruise it too hard or act all violently. So real simple, you just put your garlic clove right here, and you real delicately. Sorry, I love that joke. That's my favorite joke on there. And then you just have to mince it up just a little bit. And you're ready to rock. Mind if I just throw it right in there?
Go for it. So we got the juice from 1 lime, 1 garlic clove. I'm gonna use a tablespoon of brown sugar here. I think technically in the written recipe, this is a 1/4 teaspoon of each of these dry spices. I'm just gonna add a pinch.
Just add a pinch, man.
Nothing wrong with that. Now, you mentioned you use soy sauce sometimes in your marinade on thin pork chops.
Right.
I also like that in a marinade. It doesn't necessarily push it too far into like an Asian flavor profile. It just adds a little bit of salt and savory, would you say?
Salt, a little umami, a little background.
Yeah.
And I even mix that with cider vinegar, which is 2 opposite ends of the culinary world, and I don't care.
Yeah.
Rules are meant to be broken, especially culinary ones.
That's the marinade, that's the pork chop. Get yourself like a little bag or something to store it in. 1 hour is what I was aiming for on that marinade. You could do a little less, you could do a little more. It's gonna taste good pretty much either way.
I think it would be hard to over marinate it, like past like several days or something like that.
Yeah.
What I do, especially if I'm having a lot of people cook over, I'll marinate them or brine them the night before.
Yes.
And then that's one less thing you gotta do that day.
Yeah, that's definitely true. And then also if it's like a weeknight and you're kind of crunched for time, half an hour on the marinade and then cook it, you're fine.
And you're done, yeah, you're fine.
This is a pork chop that we've had marinating for about an hour. And now we could cook. Cook the brine, cook the marinated, we'll see what we like.
It's ready to rock.
We're back, ready to cook our thick cut pork chops. We're gonna start with those because they take a little longer time to cook. We have a cast iron pan that's getting really, really hot, which is what we want, right? We want to develop some color, some caramelization on those chops.
Yeah, the sear is the best part, because let's face it, it's the best part of the steak, it's the best part of the chicken, it's the best part of the pork chop, the seared part. The Maillard reaction is the fancy term for the caramelization of meats. What's better, a poached steak or a grilled steak?
Exactly.
Right.
You don't want to steam your steak.
No.
So we have canola oil or grapeseed oil here. You want a high heat, sort of neutral fat. If you put olive oil or butter in the pan, it would burn right away. The neutral oil, the high heat oil, is going to allow you to sear at a higher temperature without burning your fat.
Correct, sir.
Let's do it.
Let's do it. Let's season our chops real quick.
Right.
Now, I like to use a lot of black pepper. So salt, and I tell all my cooks and I tell everybody, you want to salt all sides of the pork chop, because sooner or later you're going to be gnawing on the bone, you're going to be gnawing on the fat, so make sure you season the whole way around. And as far as black pepper is concerned, I sing the song of a good black pepper crust. I mean, It's hard to put too much of this stuff. People ask me all the time, what's the secret to cooking? And the first thing I say is like, there's not one, there's 10,000, as you know.
Yeah.
There's cooking is just 10,000 little tricks, and this is one. Especially get yourself a pepper grinder, toast your black peppercorns, and grind your pepper fresh, and your cooking game is gonna be stepping up 100% right then and there. Gonna add our Earl, because I'm from New Orleans, we say Earl and zinc and rinse it off, and all the other stuff you can't understand us saying.
Yeah, I think I understood some of what you
Some
said.
of what's saying. Well, you rinse stuff off in the sink.
Rinse.
Yeah. You cook things in Earl. You burl water.
Okay.
And yeah, we just like to mispronounce stuff. It's fun. Okay, and this is the part where I like to tell people to start searing. Like, wait until the oil just starts to smoke. Not pluming like Mount Vesuvius, but nice and hot. So you want to get that good sear.
That sound too. When
Yeah.
you first drop it down in the skillet, if you don't hear that sizzle, it's not hot enough.
It's not hot enough. And what young cooks like to do is they like to start just moving around and start shaking the pan. Don't do that.
Yeah.
Let your meat sear. Let it rest in there. You'll be just fine. Everybody just wants to start messing with it. Calm down.
The more you move something around the pan, you're actually dropping the temperature of your skillet.
Right. So this is the tough part.
Yeah.
So what do I do?
It's hard to be patient.
Do
if you're a
nothing?
Chef, right? Where it's like, yeah.
Take it and give them a good flip. Oh, yeah. That's what I'm talking about right there. A good hard sear. That's going to be a good steak right there. That's going to be a good pork chop right there. I want this one.
Once you get a nice sear on both sides, do you flip it on its side and do the fat?
Exactly. I sear the bone side, the fat side, all the sides.
Yeah.
The more that Maillard reaction you get, the better off your entire steak's going to be.
Right. That's another advantage to having a grill too, because then you can get sort of the underside of the bone.
Exactly.
Too. You can't quite do that.
Can't quite sear. I mean, we'll put it there just to give you the extremities, but it'll be fine. We'll be just fine.
Yeah.
All right. I think we're ready to go in the oven.
All right. So, even though these look really beautifully cooked, the inside is still going to be too rare to eat.
Right.
Any steak or protein you have that's that thick, it's a great technique to sear it first and then finish it in the oven. We have the oven at 350, and we'll cook this probably for 5-10 minutes.
We'll see, depending on how hot your oven is. We use like major convection ovens at work, but at the house, you know, we don't have the blast furnaces that we have. It might take a little longer. You can also feel them, and this is pretty rare on the inside.
Right. We have the instant read thermometer too. If you want.
Oh no! Let's
Chef's
do it.
got a chef. You know.
Chef's got a chef. So I always like to top any of my roasted meats with a little pat of butter. We don't have to worry about it now because it's going to a 350-degree oven, and this is just going to add another layer of juiciness to the pan. Let me see. No, I'm going to need a towel.
Yeah.
Teamwork.
So next we have our thin cut pork chops, been marinating for about an hour. I feel comfortable taking it out and throwing in a pan with butter.
Sure.
I don't need to scrape off the marinade too much.
No. You get good stuff on the marinade. Leave that in.
Exactly. I will say, normally when I'm on a skillet on the stovetop, I'm cranking the heat as high as it'll go. I want to get a big sear. I want it very, very hot. Because there's some sugar in this marinade, I'm actually going to do a gentler style of cooking here. Butter till it just starts to sizzle, medium heat, and the sugar in the marinade is going to give it caramelization even without that high heat, basically.
Yeah, you're completely right. Sugars tend to burn very quickly,
Yes.
so it's always better to underburn it than to overburn it, if
Yeah.
that makes sense at all.
Always underburn your food.
Underburn your food. Well, the trick is, you know, what I tell a lot of young cooks especially is like, sometimes things are so thin, you're not going to get a good sear on both sides without overcooking it.
Right.
So get a really good sear on one side
Right.
instead of a halfway sear on both sides.
That makes a lot of sense.
Especially when you're cooking like Dover sole or a flounder, something that's really thin.
Yeah.
You try to get a good sear on both sides, you're overcooking your fish, and that's a big faux pas where I come from.
Right.
So you get one side, in fact, really thin,
Yeah.
cook it all on one side.
Exactly. That's good advice.
Every once in a while.
The thick cut pork chops, we just took them out of the oven. We're not going to slice into them right away. We're going to let them rest for a couple minutes.
Just a couple of minutes. You want that heat is still going on, it's still cooking, and you want that heat to even out, especially in the larger pork chops. Smaller pork chops, not so much.
Right.
Let them rest 1 minute, or even by the time you have them on the plate and you got your fixings, you put them in front of your kids, they'll be just fine. But the thicker your pork chop, the longer you want to let it rest. The big 20 ounces, we let rest for 5 minutes afterward, and then actually reheat them slightly so they're warm on the plate. So it sounds like a complicated process. It's not really. If you have a large roast, you can even cover it with aluminum foil just to kind of let that heat all balance itself out.
And the juices in a larger cut like that are also kind of redistributing throughout the chop, is that correct?
Of course.
If you try to cut into it right away, some people think the juice would just sort of pour out of it. Letting it rest for a couple minutes, you're gonna end up with a juicier bite rather than the juice all on your plate.
And it brings up another point about the juiciness. I see people all the time just, especially on the grill, just mashing their pork chops down or smashing their burgers and whatnot.
Yeah.
Do not do that. You are intentionally getting all those juices out. Even if you're cooking your steak well done, which you shouldn't, you never want to press hard on it. Even on a well done steak, if you just had to have one, pressing down on it is just going to release all the juices because you've already cooked most of the juices out, and then you're just doubling down. I'll come after you. Look at that. Medium,
Nice.
perfectly
Just
cooked.
a touch of pink
Just
there.
a touch of pink. Let's get the bone over here.
Yeah. Looks so good. You can see how moist it is.
Now that is good cooked pork right there. Proper cooked. In fact, I am gonna take a couple slices because I'm hungry and haven't eaten.
You want a little Malden salt?
No, I don't.
Just as it is.
I don't think it's gonna need it.
All right.
Because we're gonna top it with a little bit of our gas streak.
Right.
So this gas streak, real quick, is a very simple mixture of any acid and any sugar.
Okay.
That's the basic definition of gas streak. Here we have cane syrup and cane vinegar to double down on that cane sugar flavor. But molasses and cider vinegar work well. Honey and white wine vinegar work well. Depends on what you're serving it with. You can't go wrong. This is a wonderful thing to add to any roasted meats. Fatty things like chicken liver mousse or cheese. It goes well in charcuterie. This goes well on a bunch of things where you need some acid to balance out fat.
Right. Anything very savory, that little touch of acidity is going to help you really enjoy your food. Equal parts acid and sweetener, and you reduce it down by half.
Now I'm going to cut a piece of this fatty part because I'm a fat boy and I like my fat.
That's good.
I don't think it needs any salt. That's the beauty of a brine. Salty all the way through, not overseasoned. Oh, I heard a deep guttural. That wasn't a fake. You're not just doing this for camera.
No, that was real.
This is really good.
I want to reiterate though, because that brine works so well, I was about to pull out some like flaky salt just to finish it with. You don't need it at all.
And I stopped. I'm like, no, man, don't do it.
Yeah, that would have been a mistake. This is really delicious.
You know the golden rule about salt? You can always add a little more. You cannot take it away.
Right. All right, our little chuleta here. Let's see how the thin cut pork chop is.
Chuleta.
Yeah. This can overcook very quickly.
That's
but
okay.
I like, here, see how there's juice still
Oh
here?
yeah, you still got juice.
We did
You're
good.
fine.
Yeah.
Why are you throwing yourself under a bus, dude? I wasn't gonna say anything.
No. I'm saying it can overcook quickly, but
See,
we
again,
didn't.
I'm
we
reaching
didn't
for
do
the
that.
fat.
It's good.
Yeah.
A little bit of the lime comes through there, so that's your acidity rather than needing the gastrique.
Right.
And I taste the spices a little bit, like cumin, smoked paprika,
Right.
a little bit of chili.
I like how the paprika and the chili kind of toasted on the outside. Really kind of woke up the flavors.
We do get questions from the Food 52 community asking about, let's say you have some leftover pork for some
For
good-
some
good
reason, I don't know how that happens.
Let's say there's some leftover cooked pork. How would you sort of save it and reheat it or repurpose it again?
There are several ways. If you just wanted to reheat it again, I would say start in a pretty low temp pan with just a little bit of melted butter, not too hot,
Yeah.
and just gently warm it up in that butter. Try not to overcook the insides. You're gonna have to cook it up a little bit,
Right.
but in that butter with that slow and low approach, just till it's warm. Don't worry about blasting the oven again because it's already fully cooked,
Yeah.
and you'll be just fine. Otherwise, chop it up, throw it into a stew.
Yeah.
I would throw it in like a gumbo or collard greens.
Right.
So anytime we have leftover pork, and that's very rare,
Yeah.
even the bones will go in a stock.
Yes.
Or go in any type of vegetable. There's a bunch of flavors still left in that bone. Don't throw them away, or make your doggy very happy.
We gotta investigate this one.
Cut her open, dude.
I'm curious, so this is the side where it had that, like, the bone was down the center, and this was sort of the tenderloin piece of the pork chop.
The filet mignon of
Yeah.
pork.
So we'll see if there's a textural difference between the rib chop and the loin chop.
All right. Very soft.
There is a noticeable difference.
Like you almost cut that with a fork. But the flavor, because it's good meat, is still really good.
Right.
A little more delicate. It's a little more porky. But yeah, the texture on this is just superb.
Yeah, they're both winners. I do like the idea though that this has more of like a animal quality to it. Like you can taste the flavor of the meat, maybe a touch more. There it is.
This is what I like to do. This is like to see in my restaurants. You get bonus points for this.
I like the idea that a lot of small decisions add up to something really meaningful and delicious. Where you buy your pork, how you brine it or season it, the way you cook it on the stovetop, if there's a little bit of acidity that you finish it with at the end, all those small decisions add up to something really wonderful.
Quality pork, good brine, don't overcook it.
Yep. Toups' Meadery.
Toups Meadery and Toups South. I have 2 restaurants in New Orleans. Come see me at both. I'm always at one of them. Also, Chasing the Gator. Buy it on Amazon.com or come to the restaurant and I'll sign you up for free.
Chef, thanks so much for coming on.
Thank you. Anytime, man. I had a great time. Yeah, well, you fed me some pork, so I'm all good.